The Blair Witch Project, 1999. Film Review. Have you ever been so involved in a project that it became unhealthy? That's what happens in The Blair Witch Project. When three filmmakers venture into the woods in search of a local legend, they become lost, tired, and hungry. As the threads of their sanity slowly unravel, they begin to realize that someone or something is watching. In October 1994, three film students hiked into the old woods near Burkittsville, Maryland, in search of a local legend known as the Blair Witch. They were never seen again. 1 year later, archaeologists excavating the foundations of an old house in the area discovered the students' belongings, including camera equipment and recordings. How these things ended up buried in undisturbed strata a century old is anyone's guess. The Blair Witch Project is that footage. Heather Donahue is the coordinator of the expedition. Her friend Joshua Leonard is the cameraman. A less well-known Michael Williams joins as soundman. The students begin their journey in Burkittsville, where they visit an old cemetery with an inordinate number of child burials. They then interview several locals about the legendary Blair Witch. The stories date back to the late 1700s, before Burkittsville was founded, when a town called Blair stood in the same location. A local woman, Ellie Kedward, is accused of witchcraft after she lures local children to her house for ritual bloodletting. The townsfolk banished Kedward into the nearby forest. A particularly harsh winter took hold, and there's no way the woman could have survived. But then, one by one, all of Kedward's accusers, along with a large number of the town's children, go missing. The panicked townspeople abandon the settlement. The curse of the Blair Witch is born. Strange things continue to happen every 60 years or so after that. By 1825, people foolishly move back to the ghost town, which they rename to Burkittsville. Soon after, a 10-year-old girl drowns in the creek. Several witnesses say a ghostly hand reached out of the water and dragged her under. For 13 days after, mysterious bundles of oily sticks choke the creek. In 1886, an 8-year-old girl goes missing. She eventually returns, talking about an old woman whose feet never touched the ground. One of the search parties sent out after her didn't return, and is later discovered ritualistically disemboweled at a creekside location called Coffin Rock. In 1941, 7 more children go missing before a local hermit named Rustin Parr comes into town telling everyone he's finally finished. When police visit his home deep in the woods, the bodies of the 7 children are there, ritualistically disemboweled. Parr fesses up, but claims he did these horrendous acts on the orders of an old ghostly woman who lives in the woods. The unsympathetic townspeople string him up. After learning what they can from the people in town, the 3 student filmmakers proceed into the woods, where Heather plans to have them visit the site of Coffin Rock and an old graveyard deep in the woods. Despite Heather's confidence in her navigation skills, what should be a simple hike stretches on to hours, then days. The initially enthusiastic filmmakers begin to turn on each other as it becomes clear that they are lost. To make matters worse, they begin to hear noises outside their tent after dark, a phenomenon which intensifies each night. It soon becomes clear that someone or something doesn't want them there. Soon, their desire to solve the mystery of the Blair Witch takes a back seat to making it out of the woods alive. To find out how it all pans out, you have to watch the footage all the way to its shocking conclusion. In 1993, 2 film students from the University of Central Florida, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, decided to make a horror film. They wanted to do something different from the norm. It occurred to them that they were more scared by documentaries about the paranormal than they were by traditional horror films. TV series such as In Search Of, as well as documentaries like Chariots of the Gods, 1970, and The Legend of Boggy Creek, 1972, presented the possibility of phenomena beyond those typically accepted by science. combining these influences with a sensibility rooted in successful horror films like Jaws, 1975, The Omen, 1976, Alien, 1979, and The Shining, 1980, the Blair Witch Project became something that was greater than the sum of its parts. Another strong influence was Deliverance, 1972, which also features a group of friends on an ill-fated excursion into the wild. Inspiration also came from Washington Irving's 1824 short story, The Devil and Tom Walker, real-life tales from the Salem witch trials, and Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, 1953. These ingredients coalesced into the legend of the Blair Witch, an entirely fictional mythology created by Myrick and Sanchez. The name Blair actually came from the Florida high school that Sanchez's sister attended. Several names were anagrams for real people. Ellie Kedward is a nod to Renaissance occultist Edward Kelly. Rustin Parr translates to Rasputin, the Russian mystic of the early 20th century. Myrick and Sanchez wrote a 35-page script and attracted producers Greg Hale, Robin Cowie, and Michael Monello. Together they created production company Haxan Films, which takes its name from 1922 documentary film Haxan, which recounted the history of witchcraft through the ages and was also an inspiration for the Blair Witch Project. Pre-production finally got underway in October 1997. To help attract investors, the filmmakers created a short documentary about the legend of the Blair Witch, featuring fake news footage and newspaper clippings. Later, this idea would grow into a full-length mockumentary called Curse of the Blair Witch. This played on the Sci-Fi Channel in the summer of 1999 prior to the film's theatrical release. A website also helped to popularize the legends, portraying them as real history. The Blair Witch Project was filmed entirely in Maryland, mostly in Seneca Creek State Park near Germantown. The cemetery scene is one of the few actually shot in Burkittsville, which is about a half-hour away. Patapsco Valley State Park, west of Baltimore, also appears. Principal photography occurred over 8 days at the end of October 1997, with the shoot concluding on Halloween night. A cinematographer, Neil Fredericks, oversaw the project, but the 3 primary actors shot almost all the film. They received a crash course on how to do it, but still struggled with the technology at times. It's all for the greater good of the film, which is supposed to look amateurish, and does. They used a CP16 motion picture camera and a Hi-8 video camcorder to record the footage. The filmmakers intentionally threw the actors into an immersive reality experience. The 3 leads really were in the wilderness for several days with minimal crew contact. The directors insisted that during that time they should stay in character as much as possible. They all knew a safe word that they could say if they needed to get out of character for some reason. While they knew the film they were making was not real, they thought the legend of the Blair Witch was, and didn't find out otherwise until after the film's release. All of the dialogue was improvisational, but each actor received personalized instructions every day that encouraged certain attitudes and behaviors. The filmmakers left these instructions, as well as food, water, and supplies, in strategically placed caches. In turn, the actors would drop the day's recordings in the cache so the crew could view the day's progress. The actors got GPS devices and instructions on how to find the next cache. Each day's campsite was at a prearranged location which, hopefully, the actors would find their way to by the end of the day. The crew took care of some heavy stuff, like tents, so the actors wouldn't have to haul so much through the forest each day. The filmmakers equipped the actors with walkie-talkies so they could communicate and stay on track. Despite this, they still lost their way 3 times. The first time was immediately after leaving the parking area, when they wandered off in the complete wrong direction. Myrick remembered thinking the production was so screwed if the actors couldn't even find their way off the road without getting lost. One time, during a rainstorm, the actors found the tent and all their belongings soaked, and, unable to hail the filmmakers on walkie-talkie, used the GPS to navigate out of the forest. They ended up knocking on the door of a random house and asking to use the phone so they could call the crew. Situations like that one naturally soured the mood of the actors. The crew did little to improve things. In fact, they encouraged strife among the trio. Producer Greg Hale, a military veteran, drew upon his experiences during training, in which an opposing force pursued him through the wilderness for days at a time. In a similar way, the filmmakers required the actors to move exhaustingly long distances in a single day, sometimes going in circles. They found less food in their supply cache each day. Sleeping was tough with the noises in the woods all night. The scary stuff was not expected, and it caught them by surprise when it happened. It's up for debate how much of their performance represents pure acting talent and how much is because they were nearing the breaking point. In June 1996, filmmakers Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez put an ad in Backstage magazine, a periodical widely read by aspiring actors. The ad stated the film would be shot in a wooded location and specifically asked for actors with strong improvisational abilities. Hopefuls gathered in New York City for an unorthodox audition process. Questions were thrown at the actors rapid fire, and they were expected to quickly and convincingly answer. The original plan was to have 3 male student filmmakers walk into the woods, but on the strength of her audition, Myrick and Sanchez cast Heather Donahue in the lead role, with 2 males as her assistants. Donahue later explained that she based her character on a director she had previously worked with, who was confident when things were going smoothly, but easily became frazzled when the unexpected happened. Because the filmmakers were unknown, and because of the unorthodox nature of the project, when Heather arrived on set, she first checked to make sure they weren't planning to make a snuff film. Joshua Leonard already knew the basics of operating a camera, and that probably helped him land a role. Michael Williams got the role of the sound guy. The 3 leads had to sign a form allowing the filmmakers to mess with their heads. They also agreed to use their real names instead of fake character names to make the film more believable. With their 3 leads in place, Myrick and Sanchez set about finding extras. They advertised at a local college but only got one response. Patricia Decoux, the respondent, would play Mary Brown in the film and also help the art department. Early in the film, the leads interview townsfolk about the Blair Witch legend. Unbeknownst to the actors, many of the townspeople they interviewed had previously been briefed on what to say by Myrick and Sanchez. Not knowing this, the reactions from the lead characters are as genuine as it gets, and they must have been starting to believe there actually was something to this witch legend after all. One lady they interviewed wasn't an insider, but just a normal person, and came up with a big elaborate story off the cuff that nobody was expecting. Later, Myrick and Sanchez tried to get her to sign a release form, but nobody could find her. All these other people appear within the first 15 minutes of the film, then it's just the trio of Heather, Josh, and Mike alone in the wilderness. After being encouraged to improvise and exhausted from trekking through the woods for several days, the actors genuinely were at each other's throats. Myrick and Sanchez originally planned to have Heather and Josh be buddies, with Mike, the outsider, being the unstable element. As it turned out, Josh and Heather went at it like cats and dogs during the production. At one point, Josh was unloading on Heather so strongly that the filmmakers, despite their commitment to stay detached, had to step in and break it up. During the editing process, they ended up cutting out much of the hostility between Josh and Heather. Who says you need lots of special effects to make a highly effective horror movie? The Blair Witch Project has almost no special effects. In one scene, the characters find that their belongings have slime all over them. The slime in question is KY jelly. One scene features a bit of gore. A local dentist supplied the teeth. That's really about all there is to it. Everything else is rather straightforward, or we can't talk about it to avoid spoilers in case you haven't seen it yet. Music, that's an easy one. There isn't any. Not even in the credits. Well, there is one song on the radio in the car early on. Later, the characters sing the Gilligan's Island theme song at one point. But there is no musical score or original music of any kind. An album of music inspired by the film was released, featuring mostly 80s and 90s goth and industrial acts, and it's pretty good by all accounts, but none of that was actually in the film. As for sounds, most of what you hear is incidental to the action on screen. As an exception, late in the film when the three characters are hearing spooky sounds in the forest, the crew had a boombox nearby in the woods. Sounds of children laughing were recorded outside director Eduardo Sanchez's mother's house. Also, crew members at a distance from the characters broke sticks and threw things around to create some of the noises. After principal photography wrapped, the Blair Witch Project still had a long road ahead before its wide theatrical release. At this point, the price tag ran to about $60,000 for the production. One of the first things filmmakers Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez did was sell their camera equipment to recoup some of its cost. They sold the film camera on eBay and returned the camcorder to Circuit City, where they bought it. The store staff probably had no idea that this little video camera helped create a groundbreaking major film. The footage captured over the 8 days of shooting was some 20 hours in total length. Obviously that was way too long, so the filmmakers began a painstaking editing process that would take 8 months to complete. At this point they had trimmed down to a much more manageable 2.5 hours. This initial cut had the found footage sandwiched in between newscasts and interviews about the missing students. Ultimately, they decided that the film would be more effective without these supplemental features. They eventually used these in the Curse of the Blair Witch mockumentary and elsewhere in the marketing campaign. The filmmakers did not initially have ambitions of a worldwide theatrical release. They were just hoping it would go direct to cable. To test it out with audiences, Myrick and Sanchez sent the rough cut to small film festivals, using the feedback they got to polish it further. Reception was better than expected, however, and this gave the filmmakers the confidence to submit their creation to the prestigious Sundance Film Festival. At the Sundance midnight premiere, January 25, 1999, the Blair Witch Project was a big success, and this inspired Artisan Entertainment to buy the rights to the film so they could distribute it on a larger scale. They acquired it for $1.1 million and promptly pumped over $500,000 back into it in the form of post-production edits. Artisan wanted the directors to film alternate endings, though they'd wind up sticking with the original one. The video footage was aged to appear lower resolution than it actually was, to be more authentic to the time the film was purportedly made. The final edit ran to a lean, mean 82-minute duration. Artisan would then spend millions more on an elaborate marketing campaign. At Sundance, they put up posters with pictures of Heather, Josh, and Mike, listing them as missing. A website begun in 1998 had over 160 million views before the film's release. They did everything possible to keep up the illusion that these three student filmmakers really had gone missing in pursuit of the legend of the Blair Witch. The Curse of the Blair Witch documentary aired on TV. The actors were asked to refrain from making public appearances until after the film's release. The film was shown at 40 colleges around the country. A first trailer leaked on the internet, and a second preceded Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace in June. Word-of-mouth buzz built up to a fever pitch, causing the Blair Witch Project to go viral before anyone knew what that meant. Talk about fake it till you make it. The tiny town of Burkittsville, Maryland, where the events of the film took place, found itself overrun by scores of fans and paranormal enthusiasts trying to get close to the magic. Despite increasing their police force, they suffered vandalism, graveyard desecration, and having the town sign stolen. They did, however, enjoy the tourism dollars. Unfortunately, the magic didn't last long. Once the film came out and people knew it was a work of fiction, the number of visitors quickly declined. The Blair Witch Project had a limited theatrical release on July 14, 1999, followed by a wide release on the 30th. Early box office returns were encouraging, and the film would remain in the top 10 for 9 weeks, eventually earning over $140 million in its domestic theatrical run. Another $108 million from the international market brought total earnings to $248 million on an initial production budget of $60,000. A huge success. It was the 10th highest grossing film of the year in the United States, and one of the highest grossing independent films of all time. Just because it was successful doesn't mean everyone loved it. The shaky handheld camera footage induced motion sickness and nausea in some viewers. Theaters in Toronto even resorted to instructing queasy audience members to sit next to the aisle and try not to throw up on other people. Even a viewer who didn't get physically ill may have left with a bad taste in their mouth. Many found the ending unsatisfactory. Critics sang a mostly positive tune about the Blair Witch Project. The found footage technique was the most talked about aspect. Though not the first film to use this technique, this was by far the most successful to do so. The idea that average people could grab a camera that, unlike earlier times, is small and light enough to take on an adventure and record something incredible was a sign of the times that some called groundbreaking and imaginative. Peter Travers for Rolling Stone said it reinvents scary for the new millennium. Roger Ebert called it extraordinarily effective. There were naysayers, however, who felt the film was overrated, boring, and monotonous. As if to echo that sentiment, the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards named the film the biggest disappointment of the year, and Heather Donahue was awarded a Razzie for being the worst actress of the year at the Golden Raspberry Parody Awards show. Not all the recognition was negative, however. Donahue won a Fangoria Chainsaw Award for Best Actress. The Blair Witch Project won a Golden Trailer Award for Best Horror Thriller and an Independent Spirit Award for Best Film. Perhaps the biggest award was how effectively the filmmakers convinced the general public that the story was real. Even after the film came out, some had a difficult time accepting that it was all just make-believe. After the release of the Blair Witch Project in July 1999, the house featured in the film's conclusion, located in Patapsco Valley State Park near Baltimore, was set upon by fans of the movie, as well as paranormal investigators, souvenir seekers, and even less desirable sorts. It got so bad that the state chose to tear the structure down against protest from Blair Witch aficionados, out of fear that someone could get seriously hurt there. Even the hunting season suffered because of this film. So many amateur filmmakers were in the woods trying to make their own Blair Witch-inspired recordings, spooked wildlife headed for the hills and didn't congregate in their usual locations. The consensus on the Blair Witch Project is about the same now as it ever was. Critics love it, audiences are lukewarm. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has a certified fresh critic score of 86% based on 165 reviews, and an audience score of 56% on over 250,000 ratings. The film has made it onto many best-of lists. Paste has it at number 99 on their list of best horror movies ever. Stacker names it number 75 on their top 100. Time Out and Parade both have it at number 27. IGN currently lists it all the way up to number 24 out of their 100 best horror movies, and that's just a sampling. It didn't take long for a sequel to appear in the form of Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, 2000. If audiences were divided on the first film, they were united on this one. United in disappointment. Critics and audiences thought Book of Shadows was terrible. Some even called it one of the worst horror sequels ever. They were planning a third installment for the following year, but after the dismal results of Part 2, they quickly forgot that idea. A new sequel did eventually emerge, but not until 2016. Thankfully, Blair Witch is a lot better than Book of Shadows, but it still isn't good, just mediocre. In 2017, rumors began to circulate that a Blair Witch TV series was in development, but so far there have been no official announcements. The key players of the Blair Witch Project didn't exactly go on to huge success in the film business, but some of them carved out a place for themselves. Director Daniel Myrick hasn't done too much, but he did go on to direct The Objective, 2008, which reunited him with actor Michael Williams. This actor also reunited with director Eduardo Sanchez for Altered, 2006. Sanchez has been the more active of the two directors, also making scary films like Seventh Moon, 2008, Lovely Molly, 2011, and Exists, 2014, as well as episodes for TV shows like Supernatural, 2016 to 2020. Heather Donahue was only in a handful more films, notably TV miniseries Taken, 2002, before retiring from acting in 2008. She regretted using her real name in the Blair Witch Project, stating that it made finding more work challenging. Of the three main actors, Joshua Leonard has found the most success. He's still very active in film and TV, having been in successful programs like Bates Motel, 2015. A documentary called The Woods Movie about the making of the first film came out in 2015. This features interviews with Daniel Myrick, Eduardo Sanchez, and producer Greg Hale. A book called The Blair Witch Project: A Dossier, published September 1999, treats the events of the film as fact and dives deeper into the legend. Author D.A. Stern followed this up in 2000 with Blair Witch: The Secret Confession of Rustin Parr. A series of young adult books called The Blair Witch Files were published between 2000 to 2001. The Blair Witch Project has been adapted into comic books by Oni Press and Image Comics. A trilogy of computer games were released in 2000, and another video game titled Blair Witch came out in 2019. An action figure of the Blair Witch herself was produced by McFarlane Toys in 2001. It's safe to say they took some creative liberty. When the Blair Witch Project was making the rounds at the festival circuit looking for a distribution partner, one of the studios that passed on the opportunity was Miramax. Their young producer, Jason Blum, didn't expect much from the film. That turned out to be a mistake, to put it lightly. Blum learned his lesson, however, and in 2007 struck cinematic gold by producing a highly successful found footage film of his own, Paranormal Activity. That film, in turn, spawned 7 sequels or spin-offs and established Blum as a powerhouse horror producer. He would go on to produce numerous highly successful scary films, including Insidious, 2010, Sinister, 2012, The Purge, 2013, Ouija, 2014, Get Out, 2017, Halloween, 2018, and The Invisible Man, 2020. You could say he owes his success in large part to the Blair Witch Project. Other filmmakers also embraced the found footage technique in the wake of the Blair Witch Project. Films that feature a similar style are Wreck, 2007, Cloverfield, 2008, The Last Exorcism, 2010, Troll Hunter, 2010, Chronicle, 2012, Project X, 2012, VHS, 2012, and End of Watch, 2012. The success of the Blair Witch Project also encouraged parodies such as The Hip Hop Witch, The Bogus Witch Project, The Tony Blair Witch Project, all 2000, The Blair Thumb, 2001, and pornographic films The Bear Winch Project and The Erotic Witch Project, both 2000. It was even spoofed by everyone's favorite crime-fighting canine in The Scooby-Doo Project, 1999. The Blair Witch Project certainly wasn't the first film to feature a found footage style. The notorious Italian film Cannibal Holocaust, 1980, can claim that honor. In 1998, The Last Broadcast also presented a found footage mockumentary about a group of researchers who meet with a grisly fate in the New Jersey pine forest while searching for the mythical Jersey Devil. Indeed, The Last Broadcast and the Blair Witch Project are so similar, controversy stirred around whether or not Myrick and Sanchez stole their idea from this film. The allegation seems to be baseless, however, as the two directors' original idea dates back to 1992 and they officially registered it in 1996, prior to The Last Broadcast's release. Although it wasn't the first found footage horror film, the Blair Witch Project was by far the most successful up to that time. This ensured that more of these types of films would follow, and follow they did. While much of the dialogue and character interactions were improvisational, Myrick and Sanchez did offer a few directives to the actors. Josh plays the role of Peacemaker. Mike tells it like it is, voicing what the viewer is probably thinking. Heather is similar to Captain Ahab in Melville's Moby Dick. She is obsessive about filming and documenting every detail of their trip, even after the wheels come off. Josh even calls her out on it, saying that it's easier for her to deal with the terrible reality because she hides behind the camera lens and it filters her experience. More than just a comment on Heather's character in the film, this is social commentary on modern digital life at the turn of the millennium. For the first time in history, any person, for a reasonable price, could own their own video camera and document what was going on in the world. With great power comes great responsibility, and some people take it too far. This trend has only become stronger in the years since. Now many of us have smartphones in our pockets that have built-in video cameras and also connect to the internet. It's easy to hide from the reality around us by simply taking out our phone and beginning to scroll. If you're listening to this now on a mobile device, please pay attention to your surroundings. We'll be here later if you need to finish listening at a better time. The Blair Witch Project is rated R. It has a bit of gore, some alcohol use, and a whole lot of strong language. The F word drops over 150 times in the course of the 81 minutes. The shaky camera movements can induce nausea in those sensitive to motion sickness. It's highly suspenseful and deals with some pretty heavy subject matter. Take these things into consideration when deciding to watch or show this film to others. Oh, and those who like a nice, neat resolution to everything at the end of the film are in for a disappointment with this one. While many wise filmmakers try to let the audience's imagination do the hard work for them, think Alfred Hitchcock or M. Night Shyamalan, this film takes it to an extreme. Much of what happens is open to interpretation. Is there actually a witch hunting the characters? Are townspeople having a laugh at their expense? Is one or more of the characters in on it? Fans have been pondering and discussing these questions and others even more outlandish ever since the film came out. In the end, all we have are questions and speculation, but that's not a bad thing. Films like this encourage thought and analysis that linger on long after the credits roll. That's part of the reason why people still feel so passionately about the Blair Witch Project all these years later.